So this week we're going to talk about something that's actually in the lectionary. It's something I'm very passionate about. It's about building movements that are based in ethical values and morality. I call them moral movements in my realm of service. And recently, Sarah and I, she didn't know I was going to bring her up today. Surprise! We had a wonderful meeting, but it was weird because it was like we were trying to be like intentional about being friends or something. Like it was wonderful and weird at the same time because we worked together. But then here we are talking about things that have nothing to do with work, and she's asking me questions about like, where do you come from? And tell me the hardest things in your life, and tell me the best things in your life. And it was diving really deep, but it was amazing. Like, who does that? Like church people actually acting as friends. Who does that? Actually, in all honesty, though, it was awesome, and I encourage you all, again, to do the same. The other thing Sarah and I talked about is that we are trying to figure out what our identity is. Now, I think it's apparent that most of us are progressive, inclusive radicals, and we don't tolerate intolerance. But I think it's important for us to figure out what our mission and what our identity is going to be as a community. And Sarah brought up some amazing things in the realm of activism that I think will really help us as we continue to grow this community and continue to shape what we're going to be together. Sarah brought up 3 types of organizations. There are service organizations, those that pass out food and supplies to those in need. And there are advocacy organizations, those that assist people in need, and those that stand with them through a transitional process or maybe stand up for them in rallies. But then at Garfield Park, we realized that we kind of do those things already to an extent. I mean, we donate 100% of our resources to service organizations every week. We give 100% of our tithes and offerings that you donate out to the community, to people that are serving the community and people that are advocating in the community, which is awesome. But the one thing that we don't do, and the one thing that Santa Cruz needs, is building movements of power. What is needed in Santa Cruz is the 3rd type of organization, which is power structures. Organizations that create movements that speak to power in order to abolish the need for the former 2 types of organizations. So at Garfield Park Community Church, this is going to sound a little weird, but we want all soup kitchens to close, and we want all homeless shelters to close because we want them to become unnecessary. And that is only possible with a powerful groundswell and an intentional movement. And one of the key ingredients to actual change throughout history has been these galvanized movements. Not individual leaders and not pastors. Especially not this pastor. I've heard my own sermons. I get to hear them every week on YouTube. And if you're waiting on those things to change the world, you better keep on waiting, boy. Entities in the nonprofit sector aren't going to change the world either. What changes the world is policy. But to achieve moral policy, we need a powerful community. Now, we've seen a few of these movements bubble up throughout history. The Civil Rights Movement is an example of this. Earth Day was an example of this. I'm not endorsing this candidate, but the Bernie movement was definitely a massive movement. Occupy was so massive that it went global. And movements like these are necessary if we ever hope to have lasting change in society and positive change in policy. Now, the early church in itself was a movement for justice. These people stood up to empire. They spoke to power, and against all odds and against a massive war machine, which was the Empire of Rome, they won. But their movement really was just a reincarnation of every movement for justice, because we're always fighting a different form of the same enemy. I think throughout history, the same beast that we continue to do battle with has many faces, but our ever-evolving foe, though it may take different forms, is classism, slavery, segregation, racism, misogyny, homophobia, and even environmental destruction are all rooted in the idea that some people and some beings and some things are more deserving of rights and care than others. Now, currently, we have happily adopted this ancient evil of classism as a nation and are proudly masquerading this faceless demon around in a wedding dress by softly naming it capitalism. But labels aside, if we're going to fight injustice, we need a movement for justice. And this week we are reading about some of the key characteristics of that moral movement of the early church that I believe we can utilize today in our community. And we're going to read through some passages piece by piece in the book of Matthew, and I'm going to unpack them as we go along, okay? So Matthew chapter 14, this is verses 13 through 21. Verse 13, now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot from the towns. We're going to stop right there. The first thing that I want to point out in this passage is there's no right definition of leaders in a movement. From what we know of Christ, we know that he was likely a massive introvert. And oftentimes in scriptures, you see Christ retreat from the masses to be alone or to be with a few of his disciples. Now this is encouraging for this guy right here, because I literally have social anxiety disorder. So being around crowds and having multiple conversations with people every day freaks me out, y'all. So if you ever approach me after the sermon and you think, was that pastor kind of strange to you? Yeah, he is. He's weird because y'all freak me out, dude. I love you, but you're terrifying. People terrify me. Yet the great mystery, we have labeled God in our finite capacity to grasp something so infinite, decided in this being's omnipotence that Christopher Daniel Drury, the ultimate introvert, is suited to professionally be a voice from the pulpit every week and to constantly be in the eye of the public, because I think God is a part-time comedian. So this should be encouraging for you too, because it's refreshing for me to see that Christ as a character that led such a movement for change was in all likelihood even more introverted than I am. And this means that if you've ever thought that you could not possibly be a prominent figure in a movement because of your personality, you really can't use that as an excuse anymore. You could be the figure that the movement has been waiting on. After all, if draft-dodging, immoral, illogical, unqualified, and openly bigoted demagogues can be president in 2017, then I think it's fair to say that shy progressives can get a little bit of microphone time every once in a while. Moving on. Of course I had to say something. Just a little dig every week. Verse 14. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them and cured their sick. I'm going to stop right there. Notice how Jesus is not just preaching about the kingdom of heaven. One thing you need to notice about Jesus in the scriptures is he didn't just talk about a better society in the future. Jesus drags that future into the present. He made the world of tomorrow appear in the actions of his today. Jesus just didn't preach that there could be a better political system. He intentionally made the impossible present in all of his actions. He doesn't just say we need better health care. He shows the crowd that healing is possible. He doesn't just want better services for the poor. He serves the poor while simultaneously condemning an empire that requires some to be marginalized, while inviting those who serve that very same empire to come to the table and listen to. And this is the most important part of today's message, if you don't hear anything else. Jesus expected his followers to do likewise. Let's read on. Verse 15, when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, this is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves. Jesus said to them, they need not go away. You give them something to eat. They replied, we have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, bring them here to me. Then he ordered the crowds to sit on the grass, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. He looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and all were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, which was about 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Back then, they didn't count women and children. Kind of like, our Congress. Nothing's really changed in a couple thousand years. But this is the point. Jesus' disciples were sitting around. They were listening to a nice sermon about serving the least among them. And when the service was over, when the worship service had ended, the songs were done, the prayers were over, the disciples believed that it was time to punch out and go home. High five, guys. We said some nice words. We gave the people some hope. Now let's eat. Who cares if they starve? Let them go home. They're getting on my nerves. That doesn't sound like church in America at all, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. That can be us sometimes. That can be me sometimes. Sometimes I've got things to do after church and I'm ready to jet out of here. You might come and do the same thing. We heard some nice words, or if you come here every week, you might say, Christopher was mad again. Now let's get away from these people we pretend to be in community with on Sundays and go home and eat lunch by ourselves. And can I tell you something? We may be able to grow a massive worship service in the future, continuing that practice. But we will never change the world like that. And I do not believe Christ wanted a production on Sunday mornings. I believe that Christ wanted to produce a better tomorrow by guiding leaders that would bring the morning into the present darkness. And that movement won't be birthed with a sermon. It begins when we truly connect with those present and those we serve with. Like Sarah and I did this week. Sarah, you were honestly my inspiration this week. You're a brilliant leader, and you were my pastor at that meeting. So high five for Sarah. What this verse is trying to communicate is that movements are nurtured when we break bread with one another and get to know those we are advocating with and those we are demanding justice for. How often do we bail right after church without asking someone if they want to go grab a coffee or a beer with us? So today I am challenging you to do something that's very strange and it might be slightly uncomfortable. Go eat. Go have a beer. Go have coffee with one person here that you don't know or haven't hung out with in a while. This is your homework. And don't frown. I would have killed for homework like this in school. This is awesome. Go have a beer? Yes. Done. A+. Got it. Can I get extra credit? You got this. So your mission is this. Go in the community and build community with one another and have fun. Get a beer, watch the game, do both at the same time, but do life together in order to build this movement that will change the lives of others. The goal of Sunday mornings is not to pack the house. The goal of Sunday mornings is to bring homes to those that don't have houses. The goal of Sunday morning is to come together and feed those that are starving and not just break bread with those who sit by each other every week. And if we're going to do that, we have to build community together. So can we do that? As a church? That's your homework. All right. Grace and peace to every one of you. And Sarah, because you are my pastor, you get to come be a pastor right now. Sarah's going to lead us in communion. Y'all give her a round of applause. And as we prepare to take these elements, know that you don't have to be a Christian to take this. This is a symbol of community and solidarity. One of the things that's very interesting about this passage that I pointed out to Sarah when we were talking about presenting communion is that bread in these passages symbolize something more than just sustenance. The bread in these passages and feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000 actually symbolize unity of all people. There are two instances where Jesus feeds multitudes. The first time Jesus has 5 loaves and there's 12 baskets left over. Now the 5 loaves symbolize the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. The 12 loaves left over represent the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, Jesus repeats the same miracle, and the second time he has 7 loaves of bread with 7 baskets left over. 7 in Judaic culture at that time represented the perfect number, the number of completion, the number of heaven. 7 also represented the number of the nations in the Gentile region. So what Jesus was saying is this movement wasn't just for the Jewish people. This movement was for the Gentiles too. Very profound statement. And that translates into communion when we break bread together, which is why we say you don't have to be a Christian to take part in this community. Jesus' community is for all people, and you belong here.
So yeah, here at Garfield Park, when we say all, we mean all. That's why we have our little hashtag, all means all. I didn't know he was going to do that. But yeah, community and communion, these are all a very critical part of the church. How we relate to each other, how we connect to each other, all one thing, all one very special part of the church. And to me, communion is the most important part of the church because it's when we all come and we feed ourselves and each other. And so the night he was killed, before he was killed, Jesus took the bread and he said, "Take this, eat this. This is my body broken for you." And if you all, with someone at your table, would take the bread and break it as Jesus did. And we break this bread not just for ourselves, but to share. And then he took the wine. And he poured it out. He said, "Take this, drink this. This is my blood, shed for you." If someone at your table would pour out the wine or take the cup and pass it around,